phones, Babylons can't crack the code.
What do YouTube? B Kelly back again with another banger. Today's video, I'm going to be talking about my American Athletic Conference football predictions for the 2020-2021 college football season. And first, I'm going to talk about the American East Division. With my first place spot, I have UCF. Now, UCF has a high possibility of having McKenzie Milton back, but honestly, we don't know how he is actually going to be since, the dude almost had to get his leg amputated. He's definitely not going to be as fast as he was when he was fully healthy. But if he's playing, I'm expecting this team to be 10 times better than they were last season, even though the second string quarterback really isn't that bad. But it seemed like every quarterback was getting hurt for them last season. And this is a pretty good team. I'm predicting a 12-0 record. If you saw my ACC video, you know I do have them beating UNC. But the thing about that is that if McKenzie Milton isn't playing, I'm giving the win to UNC. And this game's going to be very, very close. It's UNC. They're a program that's on a rise. I'm not saying that UCF's going to just win this game no matter what, because there's definitely a shot that they're going to lose. I'm going to say it's a 50-50 game. I'm going to give the win to UCF right now. Then they play FIU. I'm going to have them winning that game. I have them beating Georgia Tech, beating ECU, beating Tulsa. Now, I even have them beating Memphis. And Memphis, if you kept up with Memphis and UCF in the past couple seasons, they've met each other quite a bit, and it's been a pretty good competition, but Memphis blowing 2 leads twice in the same season, so they could be out for some revenge, and that's a game to watch for. And then I have them beating Tulane, beating Houston, beating Florida A&M, beating Temple, and a game I think is going to be a very good game. It's a Cincinnati game. Cincinnati was in first place for the East Division last year. I think it's going to be a good game. I'm going to give the win to UCF though. And then I have them beaten USF in their final game of the regular season. Now, worst case scenario for the UCF Knights is a 9-3 season, losing to UNC, Memphis, and Cincinnati. But I think the best case scenario is clearly 12-0. I wouldn't be surprised if they went 10-2, 11-1, but my prediction still sticks at 12-0 right now. With my second place spot, I have Cincinnati. Now, Cincinnati was in the first place spot last season, and they could do that yet again this year, and I have them competing for that spot like usual. I'm predicting a 10-2 record. I have them beating Austin Peay, Western Michigan, Miami, and even Nebraska, USF, Tulsa, and then even SMU, which is going to be a very, very tough game, and a game to watch out for. But then I have them losing to Memphis, beating Houston, beating East Carolina, then losing to UCF, then beating Temple in their final game of the season. Now, the worst case scenario I see for them, honestly, is going to be 8-4. I say that because there is a good shot that they could lose to Nebraska. Nebraska's not a bad football team at all when it comes to Cincinnati, and it could be a good game like the UCLA-Cincinnati game was last year. And Nebraska could win that game because they are home. It's tough to play in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I think SMU could honestly easily beat them if they had the chance to. SMU has a good squad, and that's why I say worst case scenario is 8-4. But the best case scenario, honestly, is 12-0. They do have a chance to win every game this season, and I don't have that without a doubt either. But my prediction's still going to stand at 10-2. With my third place spot, I have Temple. Now, I do have Temple going down a little bit this season, and it's not that the team's not going to be any better or worse. I'm just saying this because the American got a lot tougher this season, honestly. And I'm predicting a 6-6 record. I have them losing to Miami, beating Idaho, beating Rutgers, and losing to Navy, then beating UMass and USF, losing to Memphis, beating Tulane, losing to SMU, UCF, and then beating East Carolina, then losing to Cincinnati to be 6-6 on the season. For the best case scenario for this team, I would have to say a 7-5 record, beating Navy, and maybe even 8-4 if they can beat Miami, because Miami has been disappointing these past couple seasons. But I would say worst case scenario would be 5-7 if they lost to East Carolina. With my 4th place spot, I have East Carolina. East Carolina, I honestly see them on a rise this season from these past few seasons they've had. I see that because they've made some insanely good transfer portal grabs that will be playing immediately. And I'm going to predict a 6-6 record. Now, they could do better than that. It's just they don't have the easiest schedule. Like I said, the American Conference is a pretty tough conference this season. And I think easily one of the best non-Power 5 conferences in football. Now let's get to the schedule. I have them beating Marshall, then losing to South Carolina, beating Norfolk State, then losing to UCF, beating Georgia State, then beating USF, then losing to Navy, beating Tulsa, beating Tulane, then losing to Cincinnati, Temple, and SMU to finish the season to be 6-6 and go to a bowl game. Now, let's talk about the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, in my eyes, would have to be a 4-8 season, because even though, yes, these grabs are very good and they have a very good quarterback, it's just there is a possibility they could go 4-8. But let's get to the best case scenario. Best case scenario I see in this would honestly be 8-4 if they could beat South Carolina and or Temple. With my last place spot in the east side, I have USF, who used to have a pretty good start with Charlie Strong, but had a very disappointing season last year after some injuries, and now Charlie Strong is gone. Now I'm predicting a 3-9 record this season. I have them losing to Texas, beating Bethune-Cookman, beating Nevada, then losing to FAU, Cincinnati, East Carolina, Temple, then beating Tulsa, losing to Memphis, Houston, Navy, and UCF. Now, that isn't the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, honestly, is 2-10. But the best case scenario that I see, honestly, would have to be a 6-6 record at the best. Now on to the West Division. With my first place spot in the West Division, I have Memphis. Now, Memphis to me has been a program that's been on the rise lately. They've been to a bowl game every year since 2014. And honestly, they have a lot of good returning talent. I'm predicting an 11-1 record. I have them beating Arkansas State, Purdue, Houston, UTSA, even SMU. That's going to be a really tough game, though. I have them losing to UCF, but that's going to be a game to watch as well. Then I have them winning out, beating Temple, Cincinnati, USF, Navy, UT Martin, and Tulane. But let's talk about the best case scenario. The best case scenario, obviously, for Memphis is a undefeated 12-0 season. They could definitely do it, but it's going to be tough, especially with SMU, UCF, and Cincinnati, and even Navy all in the way. Now let's talk about the worst case scenario. Now the worst case scenario that I see for Memphis, honestly, would be a 9-3 season if they lost to SMU, UCF, and Cincinnati all in the same year. Those are the teams I think will give them the most fits during the year and that they could possibly even lose to. With my second place spot, I have SMU. Now, this SMU squad is very good. They've had some very good transfer portal players that are coming in, players that are still there, and they're led by quarterback Shane Buechele, who had an amazing season last year. I'm predicting a 10-2 record for SMU, though. I'm predicting they're going to beat Texas State, Stephen F. Austin, North Texas, TCU, but then lose to Memphis, beat Tulane, then lose to Cincinnati, then win out beating Navy, Temple, Tulsa, Houston, and East Carolina. Now, the best case scenario for this team is 12-0. They could definitely do it. It's going to be tough on the way there, though. But now, worst case scenario for them, honestly, it's going to have to be a 9-3 season, because they could definitely lose to Cincinnati, Memphis, and honestly TCU. TCU could definitely give the fits this season, especially with the new addition of Zach Evans. And you know what? Make that 8-4 for worst case scenario, because even though Navy will most likely not beat them on Halloween night, and especially in Dallas, Navy can still beat them. Navy beat them last year. Navy can beat them again this year. With my third place spot, I have Navy. Now, Navy is a pretty good football team, and I'm going to predict a 9-3 record this season. I have them losing their first game to Notre Dame, then beating Lafayette College, Tulane, Temple, Air Force, East Carolina, and Houston, all being wins. And then I have them losing to SMU, then I have them bouncing back and beating Tulsa, losing to Memphis, then beating USF, and then losing to Army in the final game of the year. And then after all that is said and done, they have a 9-3 record. But let's talk about the worst case scenario. Now, the worst case scenario for them, honestly, would be a 6-6 record, because they could lose to Air Force, Temple, and Army this year to make them 6-6. Best case scenario, honestly, would probably only be 10-2 if they could get another win on SMU like they did last year, but I think it's going to be a lot harder because SMU is probably going to be more determined, and SMU is not going to be away this time. With my 4th place spot, I have Houston. Now, Houston is returning some of their better players from last season that did get hurt, but they lost their starting quarterback, De'Aaron King, in the transfer portal to Miami. I'm going to predict a 5-7 record. I have them beating Rice in the first game, then losing to Washington State, losing to Memphis, then beating North Texas, beating Tulane, losing to BYU, losing to Navy, losing to UCF, losing to Cincinnati, beating USF, losing to SMU, and then beating Tulsa in their final game of the season. Now, the best case scenario for this team, honestly, in my eyes, would have to be a 6-6 record. I think they could do that, and it could be achieved. I mean, this is a team that does have a lot of potential to be a bowl game team and even compete for the title. I mean, it's not a bad team at all. Some games last year slipped away from them, and people got hurt very early on, such as in the OU game last year in the season opener. But the worst case scenario for them would honestly have to be a 4-8 season. With my 5th place spot, I have Tulane. Now, I know a lot of people are going to hate this record, and honestly, Tulane can do way better than this. This is like the worst case scenario, but their schedule is pretty tough, honestly. I'm predicting a 2-10 record. Do not kill me, please. I have them beating Southeastern Louisiana, then losing to Northwestern, Navy, and Mississippi State, and even Houston, and SMU, UCF, Temple, East Carolina, Army. Then they finally get a win against, at Tulsa. And then I have them losing to Memphis. Now, that is the worst case scenario for this team. But best case scenario for Tulane, I would have to say, would have to be a win against Northwestern, a win against Navy, and even a win against East Carolina and Army to be 5-7. I don't see them going to a bowl game, but they definitely could. This team is definitely better than 2-10, but that's just my prediction. With my last place spot, I have Tulsa, the Golden Hurricanes. Now, Tulsa is not a very good football team at all. And I'm predicting a 2-10 record, and that's not even the worst case scenario. I have them losing to Toledo and OSU, then beating Northwestern State and Arkansas State, then losing the rest of the games in the season to UCF, Cincinnati, USF, East Carolina, Navy, SMU, Tulane, and Houston. Now, the worst case scenario I see is a 1-11 record. If they do only win one game, it's going to be against Northwestern State. And best case scenario for Tulsa, in my eyes, is a 4-8 season if they can beat Toledo and Tulane. And that's the end of the video, guys. If you guys like this video, remember to smash that like button, subscribe, turn on the post notifications for more videos. B. Kelly out.